Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this session of our virtual project management course. And this time I will talk about the project controlling and the self-understanding of a project controller. This is perhaps the first question which might arise in this context. What might be the difference between the project management, the self-understanding of a project manager, and the project controller on the other hand? And we would say, in general, the project manager is the person who's responsible for the big project picture. The big picture, the strategic integration for the project, the concerns about that the project performs in time, in quality, in budget. He's or she's the main responsible person for all team members and the general outcome of the project. But what does a project manager really need in his day-to-day decisions is perhaps somebody who's supporting him in terms of transparency. And this is the task of the project controller or the project controlling itself, because as we were talking about the projects and all the things which arise in a project, a lot of, I would say, intransparency occurs because a lot of people are working parallel, sequentially. You have the documentation, which is for sure there at the end of the project, but for a clear understanding, clear decision, you might need in a shorter distance some very informative informations and data concerning your project, so that you can make up your mind as a project manager to make the right decisions, to coordinate, for example, also to simulate different things which might go this way and that way, and you might be interested as a decision maker in how many resources you would need to get if you would put your decision on this side or on that side. So also somebody who's able to simulate different ways within your project future. And if you see this on this slide, you would easily understand which role a project controller has. It's therefore the transparency, the responsibility for the transparency within a project. And during a project, you would say you will always have different tasks to do. In the very first beginning, you would have the support of simulation of project goals and success criteria. As we were talking about the quality assurance within the project, you will at the very first beginning, once you set up your set of measurements, have to discuss from the point of view of a project controller with a project manager, which might be your key performance indicators, which might be the indicators, so that I, as a project controller, can give you feedback that this indicator is still in the frame which we were talking about, or has to be perhaps redesigned, for example. The next thing is the development of key data. The next thing would be the implementation of controlling standards, so the way in which different people within a project fill out their Excel sheets in order to hand in their time schedules, their budget schedules, etc. But also the question in which cycles, in which time frames do we set up our measurements. Then for sure, this is something which is sometimes closely in connection with controlling, is the comparison of the target performance. Then also, which is a very important task, the interpretation. You would see this is an overshoot of budgets in a certain time frame within your project, and still there's the question, why is that? What do data tell us, so that we can have an interpretation about the reasons why? And then for sure also the thinking about the steering measures. What could we do and what should be done, and perhaps also in terms of a simulation of different scenarios. For sure, the project controlling is also responsible for the creation of project reports. It's the last responsibility for the project documentation and also the ensuring of the project experiences once a project is fulfilled and the next project manager would come up in your firm and would like to have a look on the project which has been run 2 or 3 years ago, or also only 1 year ago. And then the project controlling would also be, as you see also on this slide, be responsible for the documentation. So, nevertheless, you see there is a wide range of things which a project manager is responsible for, but the main idea is always the transparency, and it's not only the idea of being the one who says the performance is not there, the deadlines are perhaps too late, the resources and the costs are out of the frame which we were discussing about. So this is surely not enough. It's much more about the supporting of making decisions. It's much more about the interpretation of data. It's much more about being the coach of somebody who has to take the decisions and bringing meaning to the data, which for sure occur in your project. What you see here is a link to webcast of Chris Croft. You see it here in the headline. It is a very simple way to create a Gantt chart in an Excel sheet. It would take you perhaps 10 minutes to watch that webcast. And Chris Croft very easily describes a way in which you can design a Gantt chart. You could integrate your goals, your tasks, the floating goals, the floating task. You can count and arrange your workload in order also to highlight that graphically. So once you have the bar chart, if you would see that in the first line, you just see the bar charts, you just see some figures and facts. You wouldn't estimate at the first glance that, for example, in the second phase within the period of the first and second milestone, there's such a huge need for resources. So I think the graphical interpretation is also a very useful one on this base. And also what you see here is something which you see here, Project 1, Project 2, Project 3, which is also described by Chris Croft. You could easily add your resources over different projects so that you can see which kind of resources you would need at which step of your projects when a lot of projects are running. So as I told you in the very first beginning, we will mainly talk about running just one project because it's a very intensive project management course, but the next step would for sure be thinking about the project controlling in a firm that has a lot of projects running. And then the project management for sure, the project controlling for sure, has to bear in mind that all the resources, all the finances, human resources have to be harmonized within the whole set of different projects. So here is my web link for that, Chris Croft, http youtube.com, and follow just the idea of Gantt chart and Chris Croft, and you'll find his very fine and very condensed way to create a very simple Gantt chart or bar chart, as you might like to call it. And once you integrate your bar charts within professional project management software, like this screencast shows you, this is done within MS Project, you will see also that you have the possibility to follow up your target performance and the comparison of target performances within a Gantt chart, also in a very graphical way. You could also follow up and do that and realize that in your Excel sheet, but nevertheless, the idea is to have integrated software tools which are also integrating time schedules of team members, etc., etc. So on this part, I just want to highlight two very interesting aspects of integrating projects in your strategic approach towards integrating projects in the strategic mission of your company. This is on the one hand the project scorecard, and on the other hand the idea of a project portfolio management. And these two ideas I would like to share with you just on a very short and overviewing, in a very short and overviewing style. The project scorecard, you might be familiar with this idea. Kaplan Norton designed that concept to have various perspectives on the integration of an activity, I would say. If you bring that into the context of a project management and the project scorecard towards the mission of the company. And as the balance scorecard follows the idea not only integrating finances but also internal business processes, learning and venture development, as well as customer integration, you could say all these four perspectives help you to have a broader view about the strategic impact of your projects in the whole company. So it might not only, it might be very useful for you also just as a frame of understanding your project. Your project will not only contribute to the performance of the company due to finances. There will be also the aspect of know-how, of learning, of business integration, customer integration. And if you would set up measurements for that, you could integrate that in the broader understanding and the broader integration of your project within the whole company. The next idea, you might follow the idea which Chris Kraft also provides you once he listed the projects and gave you the overview how you could integrate the data of your different projects within an Excel sheet. This is another way just to visualize that. You could say, just in order to understand which kind of projects are in the company, you could, for example, say there are projects who might have a high contribution to the business success, but might also have a different level on risk, which they have in themselves. And then if you follow the idea, you could see, okay, there are A projects, B projects, C and D projects, so that you have the possibility to say, okay, there might be a project which has a high risk but a low contribution to the business success. That might be a project you might think about. Or on the other hand, perhaps the perfect project would be high contribution to business success and low risk category, so that you perhaps would say, okay, this is a project I might have a closer eye on, or might follow this project more intensively. So this is always the idea. You could also combine that contribution to business success to the stress on resources. How many resources would you need to get into the project? You would once have a new categorization and get a better overview about the portfolio of your project. So I thank you very much on this point. Bearing in mind, you will provide you with an Excel sheet where you could just fill in a very simple project budget, but you could also use all the other files within the project container which we offer you on our learning platform, which you could use. And one of these main ideas in this lesson was also the project management Excel tool set which Chris Kraft provided you with in his videocast. So thank you very much.